After returning from military service overseas, managing my PTSD episodes has become a part of daily life. Tread has been exceptional in helping with that. He always wears his service vest when we're outside and obeys commands flawlessly. I'm extremely familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's something you have to know well when you depend on a service animal, but I never thought I'd need to quote federal legislation to deal with my HOA president. The first time, I encountered Karen Whitfield. She had a clipboard in one hand and a frown that looked like it had been permanently carved onto her face. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA with a tone that implied I should be honored. "I don't recall approving a dog in this neighborhood," she said, squinting suspiciously at Maverick, who was sitting obediently beside me. I gently explained that Maverick wasn't a pet. He was a trained service animal, which makes him exempt from pet restrictions according to federal law. She scoffed, muttered something under her breath about people always finding loopholes, and walked off. I probably should have taken that as a red flag. In the following weeks, I received 3 separate notices accusing me of various minor violations. My grass was allegedly a 1/4 inch too long. My mailbox was apparently the wrong shade of black, and my trash can had reportedly been visible from the street for about 45 minutes after pickup. Each complaint was signed with Karen's overly decorative signature, complete with a smiley face that somehow felt more hostile than welcoming. I corrected all the listed issues, wanting to avoid unnecessary conflict, but I couldn't shake the feeling that these nitpicky warnings were just the beginning. Things escalated at the next HOA meeting, where Karen introduced a new proposal. All animals, including service dogs, would have to be registered with the HOA and wear board approved identification. When I raised my hand and pointed out that this would go against the Americans with Disabilities Act, she immediately interrupted me, declaring that federal laws didn't override the community's rules. A few neighbors looked uneasy, but no one said anything. After the meeting, Karen approached me and said quietly, "If you want to make things hard, I can make things hard too." Her breath smelled of stale coffee and pure menace. A few days later, I was enjoying a peaceful morning on my porch with Maverick resting at my feet. I was reading the newspaper when I noticed a shadow stretching across the lawn. Karen stood there, in her standard khaki shorts and polo shirt, holding a spray bottle. "Your dog's breaking the new pet rule," she said loudly so nearby neighbors could hear. "He's not wearing the proper HOA identification." Remaining calm, I reminded her that Maverick was a federally protected service dog and that the HOA couldn't demand special ID. I also pointed out that the proposed rule hadn't even been approved yet. Her face turned bright red. "I'm sick of you military guys thinking the rules don't apply to you," she snapped, stepping onto my property. "If you won't obey, I'll handle this myself." Before I could react, she raised the spray bottle and sprayed Maverick in the face. He cried out and backed away, pawing at his eyes. I leapt up, positioned myself between her and Maverick, and demanded to know what she'd sprayed. "Just a mix of vinegar and water," Karen replied smugly. "It won't hurt him. Maybe now. He'll respect authority." I was furious, but my military training kept me composed. I carried Maverick inside, gently rinsed his eyes, and made sure he was okay. The vinegar had irritated them, but there didn't appear to be any lasting harm. Once I was confident Maverick was resting comfortably, I called 911. "911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. I explained that someone had assaulted my service dog, emphasizing that interfering with a service animal is a federal crime. The dispatcher took all my details and said officers would be dispatched right away. Roughly 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived at my door. I explained everything, showed them Maverick's certification and training documentation, and pointed to Karen's house across the street. One officer stayed with me to take my full statement, while the other went to speak with her. From my window, I could see her waving her arms and yelling. Her face was a twisted mix of outrage and panic, but the officer remained calm. When both officers returned, they told me that Karen had admitted to spraying Maverick, claiming she was just enforcing HOA rules. They explained that they had informed her that interfering with a service dog was a federal violation under the ADA, punishable by hefty fines and possible jail time. On top of that, what she'd done also qualified as animal cruelty under state law. They were arresting her and asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said yes. Karen was taken to the squad car in handcuffs, screaming that she'd have me kicked out of the neighborhood and that everyone would turn against me. Some of the neighbors had come outside to watch. I overheard one whisper, "She's finally crossed the line." Later that day, one neighbor came over and apologized for staying silent during the meeting. "We've all been afraid of her," she admitted, glancing down at Maverick, who had recovered and looked as steady and composed as ever. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Karen was formally charged with interfering with a service animal, animal cruelty, and harassment. Her first court appearance was almost theatrical. She arrived in high-end clothing with a fancy lawyer, who grew more uncomfortable as the evidence piled up. The judge didn't hold back. He made it clear that community regulations don't trump federal law, especially not laws protecting people with disabilities. While her trial was pending, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. I brought Maverick with me, expecting another confrontation, but to my surprise, almost every homeowner showed up. The vice president of the board stood up and called for a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership, citing her dangerous actions and the legal risks she'd created for the entire neighborhood. The vote was unanimous. Karen was removed from the board on the spot. Someone had even made new name tags for the board, and hers was notably missing. When the criminal trial finally wrapped up, Karen pled guilty to lesser charges in order to avoid a longer sentence. The judge gave her 30 days in county jail, a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service at an animal shelter, and mandatory education on disability rights. As the sentence was read, her face flickered between disbelief, rage, and, finally, a quiet understanding of what she'd done. "But I was just following the rules," she whispered weakly as the bailiff approached. The judge leaned forward and said, "The most important rule, Miss Whitfield, is to follow the law that protects service animals and those who depend on them." As Karen was led out to begin her jail time, our eyes met briefly. Gone was the arrogance and smugness. What I saw instead was a woman who had finally run into a law she couldn't manipulate. She mouthed something that might have been, "This isn't over." But we both knew it was. Maverick sat calmly beside me, the very picture of a disciplined, professional service dog. I reached down to scratch behind his ears, and he leaned in just slightly. A small, quiet show of trust. We had faced an unexpected battle together and come out the other side stronger than before. So if you believe in standing your ground, if you've ever dealt with people who tried to push you off your own path, or if you just love real stories that speak the truth, then this is the place for you. Hit that subscribe button and join us here at HO Voice, where every story matters, and every voice gets heard.